In the middle of a dense forest, a monster wrapped in writhing worms suddenly emerged and made its way into the human village. Its grotesque body was further covered with crimson tentacles that squirmed and twisted as if alive. Everywhere it passed, the ground withered, and no grass dared to grow in its shadow. Grandpa's eyes widened as he immediately recognized the creature as a wild boar that had been twisted and corrupted into a demon. At that moment, it was nothing less than the living embodiment of evil and festering resentment. The tower was instantly reduced to rubble, and the raging boar charged forward with terrifying speed, heading straight for the heart of the village. Grandpa had warned Ashitaka in a trembling voice not to interfere with the creature, for anyone who touched its curse would carry that burden forever. Despite the warning, Ashitaka had mounted his loyal red elk, Yakul, and had fearlessly given chase to the rampaging demon. The monstrous boar soon caught sight of a group of frightened girls, and with bloodlust in its eyes, it prepared to strike them down. In the very last moment, Ashitaka had stood firm, drawn back his bow with unwavering resolve, and released an arrow that pierced the boar's eye. But this had only driven the beast into greater fury, and the boar instantly sprouted countless black tentacles that lashed out wildly before coiling tightly around Ashitaka's arm. In defiance, he had turned his body, drawn another arrow with steady hands, and struck the monster's remaining eye. The blinded boar had staggered. Its monstrous tentacles dissolved into smoke, and at last it had collapsed to the ground with a thunderous crash. Ashitaka's arm had throbbed with unbearable pain, as though it were being eaten away by burning acid. At that dreadful moment, the boar had let out its final words, cursing the humans as filthy creatures and declaring that one day they would feel the same pain and resentment he had carried. With those words, the corrupted beast had rotted away before their eyes, its body decaying into nothing. By the end of the night, the scars etched into Ashitaka's arm had already sunk deep beneath the skin, leaving a dark mark of corruption. The village witch had revealed that the boar had been driven into a demon because of the iron bullet lodged within its body, and that the scar on Ashitaka's arm was a curse placed upon him by the wrath of a fallen god. She had warned that when the scar reached his bones, death would surely claim him, and to break the curse, he would need to journey far to the west in search of answers. Ashitaka, once chosen to become the next chief of the clan, had severed his hair as a symbol of departure and begun his journey with his faithful red elk, Yakul. On his journey westward, Ashitaka had come across a band of ruthless bandits ransacking a helpless village. And though he had tried to intervene, his right arm had swelled painfully as soon as he drew his bow. The cursed strength in his body had overflowed, and the arrow he released had shattered both arms of the bandits in an instant. When he had loosed another shot, the power had surged again, and the arrow had torn straight through the head of another robber. In the midst of the chaos, Ashitaka had managed to rescue a wandering monk, a man of great knowledge, and he had immediately asked him about the curse left by the evil god. The monk had explained that far to the west lay the forest of the mountain beast, and that the god residing there might hold the power to lift his curse, so Ashitaka had pressed forward on his long and uncertain journey. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a group of villagers had been traveling hurriedly through heavy rain when two great white wolves had appeared on a distant hillside. Upon their backs had been a mysterious girl, and Eboshi, the leader of the villagers, had remained calm as she ordered her men to drive the wolves away with muskets. Before they could carry out her command, a fully grown white wolf had lunged at the front line, scattering the men into panic. Several villagers had tumbled off the cliff along with their heavy loads, so Eboshi had taken aim without hesitation and fired her musket, striking the white wolf god in the neck. The wounded god had staggered and plunged off the cliff, and not long after, Ashitaka, who had happened to be passing by, had discovered the injured villagers who had fallen. After pulling two of them to safety, Ashitaka's eyes caught sight of a strange scene where a girl had stood beside the injured white wolf god, licking its wounds to heal it. The girl's instincts had been sharp, and the moment Ashitaka had stepped forward and called out to her, she had turned to him with eyes filled with nothing but hatred. Without a word, she had mounted the white wolf once more and vanished into the wilderness. One of the frightened villagers trembled as he stared at a pale, ghostly figure in the forest, but Ashitaka calmly told him not to be afraid, for it was only a kodama. The kodama was a sacred spirit of the woods, a symbol of the forest's prosperity. With the guidance of a small group of them, Ashitaka and the others ventured deeper into the heart of the forest. The place before them resembled a living fairyland, lush and untouched, and when exhaustion overcame him, Ashitaka bent down to drink from a clear stream. Suddenly, a golden radiance shimmered in the distance, revealing a herd of majestic deer as they gracefully passed through the forest. At that very moment, Ashitaka's cursed arm flared with pain, forcing him to plunge it into the cool water to suppress the corruption. As the herd of deer faded into the shadows, the golden glow disappeared with them, and Ashitaka's pain at last began to ease. This strange encounter seemed to wash away not only the agony of his arm but also the fatigue and weariness that weighed on the three of them. Soon after leaving the enchanted woods, they arrived back at the villagers' settlement. The village was fortified with sharp wooden spikes, standing tall like a protective fortress, and it served as a safe haven for the two rescued villagers. Ashitaka was brought before the chief, Lady Iboshi, and he immediately asked her if she knew the reason why the wild boar had turned into a demon god. Iboshi led him to the backyard where workers were forging weapons, and there she unveiled her latest creation, a powerful firearm, before admitting that the bullet inside the demon boar had been fired by her own hands. Hearing this truth, Ashitaka's right arm trembled violently, and he found himself unable to restrain its cursed rage. Even as he pressed down his right arm with his left, the bloodthirsty desire to kill Iboshi still pulsed through his body. At that moment, one of the villagers spoke up, explaining that he too suffered from the same ancestral curse, and that it was only Iboshi who had shown compassion by taking care of them. Later, under the pale moonlight, Iboshi shared with Ashitaka the tale of the ghost princess, named Sun. Sun had been raised since childhood by the white wolves, and like the beasts of the forest, she bore deep hatred for humans who destroyed their land. In Iboshi's eyes, Sun was nothing more than a tragic girl whose heart had been stolen by the white wolf. That very night, the ghost princess infiltrated the fortress, leading a sudden assault and attempting to assassinate Iboshi, but the villagers quickly surrounded her. San clashed with Iboshi in a fierce battle, and neither side could gain the upper hand. To bring the conflict to an end, Ashitaka called upon the strength of his curse, rushed forward, and swiftly subdued both women. After pacifying Iboshi, he lifted San onto his back and carried her away from the fortress. As he made his way to the gate, a villager's musket suddenly went off by accident, and the bullet pierced through Ashitaka's body, yet he refused to falter. With blood running down his side, he pushed open the heavy gates with one hand, and the villagers watched in stunned silence at the sheer force he displayed, leaving none with the courage to stand in his way. Halfway through the forest, San suddenly awoke, and Ashitaka, weakened by the loss of blood, collapsed onto the ground. Unaware that Ashitaka had risked everything to save her, and driven by her hatred of humans, San immediately tried to take his life. But Ashitaka, with fading strength, looked at her and uttered words that stunned her completely, telling her that she was beautiful. The ghost princess froze in disbelief, her heart shaken by words she had never expected to hear from a human. Moved despite herself, San chose to save him, carrying Ashitaka to the sacred pool of the mountain beast god, where she gently placed a healing plant upon his head. When the Kadama spirits noticed the ritual, they suddenly scurried up the trees, as if summoned by an unseen presence. Under the pale moonlight, a radiant being emerged from the shadows of the forest, its body glowing with divine light. Each step it took caused life to bloom in its wake, and before long, the majestic mountain beast god stood before Ashitaka. With only a gentle kiss of divine grace, the god healed Ashitaka's wounds, restoring his broken body, while a monk hidden in the shadows witnessed everything with greedy eyes. That monk had been sent by the imperial court, tasked with hunting down the mountain beast god and seizing his power. Not long after, the ground shook as a massive herd of wild boars appeared, led by a massive white boar. This was the revered boar god, the king of pigs, and soon Ashitaka stirred awake to behold his presence. The boar god rallied his warriors, encircling the humans, for they knew their king had been gravely wounded by Iboshi. Their hatred burned as they vowed to slaughter the humans in vengeance, and the boar god advanced slowly toward Ashitaka. Sensing Ashitaka's curse, the boar god recognized the lingering pain of the fallen boar king, and knew that among them, one of the pig gods had already descended into a demon. Even so, the boar god chose to spare Ashitaka's life, but warned him never to return to the forest again. Meanwhile, far away, the imperial army approached Iboshi, offering their cooperation, for the emperor had heard that the head of the mountain beast god could grant immortality. Iboshi desired nothing less than complete control of the forest, and their interests aligned in ambition and blood. That night, Ashitaka awoke within a quiet cave, finding San asleep beside him, and quietly rose to step outside. There, he pleaded with the great white wolf god to stop the boars from waging war against the humans, but the wolf god declared with bitter resolve that one day he would personally bite off Ibashi's head. By morning, the cave was empty. San had vanished. Before leaving, Ashitaka placed his protective amulet before the white wolf, asking it to be given to San. Elsewhere, the humans prepared their artillery, filling the skies with thick yellow smoke to provoke the boar warriors into battle. Driven by rage, the boar god led his warriors in a fearless charge against the human guns, but the heavy bombardment tore through their ranks, and the mighty herd was almost annihilated. When Ashitaka finally reached the battlefield, the ground was littered with the bodies of fallen boars, their cries of anguish silenced forever. Among the wreckage, he found a few surviving villagers, and from their trembling lips, he learned that Eboshi and the monks had already gone deeper into the forest to hunt the mountain beast god. Beneath the corpse of a slain boar, Ashitaka discovered a small white wolf cub, and with the villagers' help, he managed to pull it free from the weight of death. Guided by the little wolf, Ashitaka pressed onward, determined to find San once more. Only the boar god remained in the forest, his massive body battered with wounds and his skin bruised, dragging himself forward through sand and blood. With great effort, he staggered toward the sacred pool, determined to summon the mountain beast god to heal his injuries. But before he could reach the waters, humans disguised in boar skins ambushed him, and with his strength finally exhausted, the boar god collapsed onto the ground. Surrounded and overwhelmed with pain, his heart swelled with bitter hatred for mankind. Dark corruption spread from within, and his broken body sprouted writhing black tentacles as he teetered on the brink of becoming a demon god. San rushed forward, trying desperately to stop him, but the cursed tentacles lashed out and bound her tightly. Ashitaka arrived just in time and charged through the chaos, struggling to reach San, only to be thrown back with a crushing force. The great white wolf god leapt into the fray to shield her, but even he was struck, half his body devoured by the spreading corruption. Then the forest fell silent. From the shadows emerged the mountain beast god, his glowing form radiating divine stillness. Eboshi seized the moment and fired a musket shot into his head, yet the mountain beast god stood unharmed, untouched by human weapons. As he stepped closer, the cursed tentacles faded, dissolving in his presence. The god approached the fallen boar and bestowed upon him a merciful kiss. With that blessing, the boar god collapsed peacefully, his tormented life ending at last. Moonlight poured into the forest, and the mountain beast god began to transform into his vulnerable night form. Knowing this was her chance, Ibashi readied her musket once more. Ashitaka hurled his dagger and rushed forward, vines bursting from the musket to entangle her weapon. Yet, even bound, Ibashi pulled the trigger, and the shot severed the head of the mountain beast god. A massive black ooze erupted from his body, condensing into bursting bubbles that spread across the forest. Wherever the black liquid touched, the land withered, trees collapsed, and life was stripped away. Eboshi seized the severed head and tossed it to the greedy monk. But in that instant, the headless white wolf god launched one final attack, biting off Eboshi's right arm before falling lifeless. The monk sealed the mountain beast god's head inside a box, believing he had secured immortality, but the god's headless body rose to its feet, stretching out endless black tentacles that scoured the forest in search of what was stolen. The cursed flood spread rapidly, drowning the woods in black water and reducing everything it touched into ruin. Even the human village was swallowed whole, its walls and houses crumbling under the overwhelming tide. At last, persuaded by Ashitaka's words, the monks surrendered and returned the severed head. Together, Ashitaka and San lifted it high, offering it back to its rightful body. The mountain beast god's rage subsided, his light shifting from darkness to radiant blue. In an instant, he dissolved into a great wind, and the ruined forest bloomed anew, painted in vibrant green as life surged across the land. Ashitaka looked at his arm and saw that the curse had vanished, his body finally free. San, however, declared that she could never forgive humanity and chose to remain in the forest with the wolves. Ashitaka decided to live among the humans in the village, yet promised her he would visit. And so they parted, each walking their own path, bound not by fate but by the bond they had forged. Burn brighter than ever, unleash your true power, and watch the next video now.